It
It's
feels
$10,
good.
$20.
It feels good to spend that money.
And I know every single time that I say this, a bootcamp owner loses their wings, and I get it. So, I'm not too upset about it. But I know I've made a lot of bootcamp owners mad with that one. What's going on, y'all? This is part 2, okay? So we recorded an episode the other day of if you want to learn a code, what ways can you go about it? And by the end of the episode, we realized we never really covered like the actual resources, the things that you would use.
Yeah.
And so I think Leon and I, we have some similarities in some of our approach on this one. I think it's been tried, true, and tested. I think some of our answers are going to be very different than a lot of individuals in the coding space. Mainly because I personally think, and I may ruffle some feathers with this, but I think there's a big distinction between what I believe works versus what I've seen work, right? And so a lot of times when people give you advice, they're like, well, this worked for me, and this was the way that I did it, and so you should do it that exact way too. But there's not a one-size-fits-all. And so I often see the advice that's given out on social media. A lot of it's not so great. And so I thought we should come back on here and cover part 2 for this. But before we do that, let's go through our intros. Hello, everyone. I am Danny Thompson. I'm Director of Technology at a company called This.Dot Labs.
And I'm Leon Noel, Managing Director of Engineering for a wonderful nonprofit called Resilient Coders and a community member at 100 Devs, which is hopefully going to be pretty relevant for today's talk or conversation.
Very relevant. Very relevant. So I guess we can kind of dive into this a little bit and start, I guess, since we've already covered some of the mentality people should have or what they should be discovering. I'll bring back the one piece of advice that I always give, I will continue to give, and I will give until probably the end of my time. Research your local market to see what's actually in demand, where the job opportunities are, what companies are having problems with, what are they trying to fill. Especially if your goal with this is to get a job in tech, right? If your ultimate goal is like, I want to learn and I want to get employed, I think that's one of the biggest things that you can do, because if you just follow some blanket advice that is given out on the internet, you're only going to know one path, and that may not even be applicable to your market. What about you, Leon? You want to go ahead with this?
Yeah, I think we were kind of talking about in the last episode too around like the psychology behind learning. And so for me, I think the thing I think about most is the reality that most people that attempt to start learning how to code are not going to make it to the other end. Right. And so with that reality in mind, if you are committing in this new year to saying, hey, I want to learn this, I want a better life for myself, my family, because I want to get the job, or, hey, this is a skill I've always wanted to learn, so I want to put that time and energy into it. I think there are certain paths that are going to lead you to be more successful than others. And I think at the end of the day, I like to really surface that end goal. So for me, I think in the beginning, it's about like, what can you do to build that momentum, to like get over that activation energy, actually start learning, commit to something, be consistent with something that gets you closer and closer to your goals. When we look at like the research that came out of Harvard with CS50, it was like 1% completion rates, right? And so all these people start with this really wonderful intention of like learning these skills, and for some reason they don't get to the other end. And I think that is a large part around how they start the learning journey. They get overwhelmed, they get frustrated, they don't get that initial hit of dopamine that they had when they were planning out what the rest of their life's going to look like, and then they kind of fall off the wagon. And so I think kind of addressing that piece, and then also, hey, if your end goal is to get a job, all right, how can I learn, and then how can I have the skills that are going to be applicable in my local market? I think that's beautiful advice too. And I think probably to kick it off, like one thing I think we're both really in agreement with is we both really love FreeCodeCamp. Right? Like if we're talking about, hey, top of mind, you want to get started today. I always say, don't delay, start today. And you want to be writing code within the first 30 seconds. As Danny always says, FreeCodeCamp is the place we kind of think about. And so I know that's been a big part of your journey. It's been a big part of my journey too. And so maybe we can start there.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in FreeCodeCamp. It's exactly where I started. And actually, yesterday, this is kind of news for us in the Thompson household. My son started learning how to code on FreeCodeCamp. He has like a little background. He did a robotics camp, and so he has kind of like a basic Python background, very basic. And so he's like, I really want to do more. And he said, Dad, I got the goal to make a website and I got the goal to make a Roblox game with code. And I was like, those are completely out there goals because you've never discussed this with me before this very moment. But since you have the motivation right now, as soon as we got home from picking him up from school, we got on FreeCodeCamp right away. Not only did he get into writing his first few lines of code, I saw him without prompting, without motivating him, he took pages of notes.
Wow.
The same thing that I did. I got books in the closet, right? He just started on his own. And so I think for me, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, motivation and inspiration have expiration dates. It's going to expire and something else needs to take its place, right? But while you have the motivation, because it comes and goes like the wind, it changes directions all the time. You need to act on that thing when that motivation is there in order to make a habit, right? So make that habit. You got the motivation right now. You're listening to this podcast and you're like, I'm brand new to coding. Just start writing some code, right? It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be there. Yeah. And so FreeCodeCamp is a great way to do that. And then I always advocate for free resources first because what is the common practice of a lot of predatory boot camps, right? I won't call out any names, but we know that they're out there. They want to get you before you've gotten a time to figure out whether this is difficult or not because it's not easy, right? It's hard. And so they want to grab you when you're excited. They'll tell you the rainbow is on the other side of this door and the sun is shining and everyone's on the beach writing code. I'll be honest. I've tried to write code on the beach, man. The sun's too bright. I can't see my laptop screen. It sucks. So you need to act on it when you have the motivation, but I would like for you to try it with free resources first before breaking the bank. Yeah. And so FreeCodeCamp is a great way to do that. 100 Devs is a phenomenal way to do that.
Yeah, I think I think you hit a really big nail on the head there is everyone and their mama right now is trying to sell you on a dream, right? Especially end of December, beginning of January, that new you, like new year, new you vibe is in the air. Everyone wants your dollar because this is the time that you're going to spend it. And like you're saying, it's going to be sunshine and rainbows if you just spend this little bit of money. And the really worst thing about it is that you feel good spending the money. You feel so much better spending the money than you do sitting down to actually study. And so you have to be very aware of that, especially in this month. If you're like, hey, I'm finally going to do this. I'm finally going to make these moves. Everyone and their mama wants your dollar. So, like Danny's saying, free resources, best place to go. FreeCodeCamp, you can be up and running in any of the thing that you have interest in, whether it's Python, JavaScript, whatever you have an interest in, they have a track to get started. You can see if you like it. You can see if this is the thing for you, to see if the different flavors or things something you care about, right? And then once you know that, hey, this is something I want to do, there's lots of different bits of advice that you can go through for like, all right, how do I do this for the long haul? Right. And so FreeCodeCamp has their certification tracks, which I think are wonderful. Like you can go through it and kind of learn all the things you need. I, of course, run something called 100 Devs, which is a live program originally. And now we have something called the Catch-Up Crew, where folks every single month are kind of starting and going through a cohort model. I think a cohort model for learning code is really important. And it kind of comes down to a few different things. When I was teaching at General Assembly, I'm distinguished faculty at General Assembly, one of the largest bootcamp providers, the thing I noticed is that the benefit of a bootcamp was that you were butt was sitting in a seat somewhere. You had direct communication with someone that could help you, but you had a group of peers that were all going through the same struggle. And you could look to your left and look to your right and be like, this doesn't make any sense, right? And they would be like, yeah, I have no idea what the hell's going on. And then that little bit of feedback, a little bit of confirmation that it's not just you, gives you the grace you give yourself the grace to be like, all right, this is going to take a little longer than I thought. It's going to be a little bit more rough than I initially planned, but I can see that there's a path that if I just stick to it, I can make it through the end. And so with 100 Devs, we've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people get jobs that have directly gone through our program. And you can read the celebrations channel. You can join our huddles every week. You can hear from people that are on the job search, that have been successful in the job search. They're negotiating offers. And when your motivation, your discipline is at its weakest, you know that you have a touch point every single week to kind of get some of that energy to realize that, hey, this is difficult, but I have a community around me that's going to help me make it to the end. And so I think where you learn is important, That's why we both recommend Free Code Camp so highly. And then where you find community is also really important. That can be online and that could be in person with something like what you run, Danny.
Yeah, and even to clarify one thing, kind of what I said, it may come across in the light that I'm anti bootcamp or something like that. I'm not pro bootcamp and I'm not anti bootcamp. I'm pro knowing all your options before making a decision, right? And so for me, you need to kind of know what you get with a bootcamp. And I think Leon hit the nail on the head there when he said, being a part of a cohort, right? And so for me, there's nothing proprietary in what the average bootcamp teaches. There's no secret formula or secret sauce. They're teaching the exact same thing everyone else is teaching, right? Whether it's an online course, whether it's this or that. Now, the quality may be at a different level, right? Also, your commitment may be at another level because you're like, hey, I've paid so much for this, I got to be here. You sitting in that room may be at a different level, right? And so you need to ask yourself, is that worth the $15,000 or $30,000? For some people, it's a yes. That's worth the 30 grand. It's worth the $15,000 that they're dedicating to that. And if you feel that way, by all means, at least now you're knowledgeable in knowing what you're signing up for. If the answer to that is no, then you know exactly what you're avoiding at that point, right? And so I think knowing that up front makes a huge difference in a lot of people. And I know every single time that I say this, a bootcamp owner loses their wings, and I get it. So, I'm not too upset about it. But I know I've made a lot of bootcamp owners mad with that one. And the reality is because for them, they want us to push people towards them versus the reality is I can't knowingly push the whole world towards a bootcamp when I know a lot of people don't know what they're signing up for. They don't know that they're signing up for an income sharing agreement where they're going to lose their salary for years to come.
Yeah, and it's really sad because they will prey on you in your deepest, darkest moments because they can extract that couple $1,000s out of you. And as someone who still runs boot camps, works through boot camps, I think they could be phenomenal value for certain people. Like if your work's paying for it, right? Things like that can be really helpful. But like Danny said, there's no secret. There's no proprietary sauce. A lot of them will promise like hiring partners, stuff like that. That's all gone. There's nothing that you're going to get from a paid boot camp that you couldn't get from something online, like 100 devs, going through other communities, things like that. And so that's why I started 100 devs, right? Pandemic hit, people lost their jobs. The boot camps I ran were $10,000+, or we're Resilient Coders, which is a nonprofit where we actually pay people to go through the program. They were just highly selective. We were only taking in 45 people a cohort, right? So 100 devs would start to be like, hey, we can give you the same training, the same skills, the same thing that you would get out of these paid experiences for free, and give you a cohort model so you have a group of people to go through it with till the end. And that's why I think it was successful, right? Like you didn't have to take those dimes. And I think it's funny you mentioned the boot camp owners getting mad. I have had people, this is multiple at the point, that have sent me emails saying you are like the worst thing that happened to the industry. Like I'm not lying when I say this. Like you're the worst thing that's happened to this industry. You should be like ashamed of yourself. And then those same people, they're in our huddles every Tuesday and Friday, just trying to see what we're doing. And then the language magically starts showing up on their websites. The language starts magically showing up in their curriculum because they're able to take what we're giving out completely for free and then putting it into their own programs. And I never block them. I never do anything because if it helps somebody, it helps somebody. But it's funny to see kind of how, I don't want to say predatory, but how wild these individuals can be. And so you have to be careful. There's sharks in the water. They can smell the blood and they're coming after your dollars. You don't have to spend a dime to learn any of this stuff. And you can always change your mind. You can get a month into it and be like, you know what? I really want to pay the X amount of dollars. And I've done FreeCodeCamp. I've done CS50. I know this is the thing for me, but I want X, Y, and Z. And then, all right, make that decision. But in your first couple of days, your first couple of weeks, the first initial challenges, please use a free resource. The ones that we mentioned are a great place to get started. You'll find a lot of wonderful people, and then find your community. Has to be a community of folks who are going to be there with you, whether it is in person, whether it is online, whether you're going to something like DSG, or you're going to 100 Devs, or FreeCodeCamp even has local meetups in a lot of places. I spent a lot of weeks going to a Panera Bread in Boston to meet up with other folks that were doing FreeCodeCamp, and so you got to find community, because that's what's going to help you stick in the beginning.
So let's move on from that. There's too much I'm going to say here, and it's like we're going to go through another hour episode, not finishing everything. So you start with a free resource. Now, if you're still at the beginning stages, I'm going to tell you one thing that in retrospect sounds funny, but at the time, I was genuinely confused by this. And so, like all people that start on like an online editor, like or an online website resource, you start coding in the browser, right? Like you're just coding in whatever text box they provide you. FreeCodeCamp provides you a text box on the right side of the screen, and you're trying to match it and make sure your output is the same, right? I did the same. Or sorry, left side of the screen, sorry. But regardless, I did the same. And so when it finally came time where I was looking at YouTube tutorials and all this stuff, I saw everyone online typing into something that I didn't know what to call. And I spent literally hours trying to figure out what this thing was called. I still remember the Google search that I made, thing people type code into, right? And I could not figure it out for the life of me. Yeah. It's called an editor. It's called a code editor. And some code editors are like VS Code, or from JetBrains, you might use something like WebStorm, or you may use something like Cursor, or all these other options out there, right? But the reason why I say this is you shouldn't feel terrible, bad, or low for Googling something and not knowing what it is. To be honest, there's still stuff that I Google to this day that when I hear people talk about, I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. And I just start Googling it. Matter of fact, I had a meeting about that 4 hours ago from this thing where we were talking in the meeting. I'm like, I don't know what this is. And so I'm Googling it right there in the meeting in real time. So don't feel bad about it. I always say you can never feel bad for not having information that you didn't know existed. Yep. Where you should start feeling bad is you know this information existed, somebody already spent time teaching it to you, and you've completely forgot everything. So you do a real refresher without wasting anybody's time, right? Don't feel bad for not having information, especially when you're new to this. You don't come from a technical background. You don't come from a computer science background. Don't feel bad about it. But you need to start getting those tools in line, right? So you need your code editor. You need to get set up with GitHub. Now, one thing, my answer on this has changed over the years. I used to say it was absolutely mandatory and a must to learn everything Git related, terminal related, to use it in terminal itself. As the tools have progressed and gotten better, Leon, my answer has really changed on this. Like, especially in the last couple of years specifically. The UI tools, like, Git Kraken, so great at what it does, to where I really can't say that. Or GitHub Desktop is pretty great. I can't get mad at anybody for using it anymore. Yeah. Like, I think it does pretty much everything that you would want. My one hang up, at least at that time, it was pre-pandemic or right at the beginning of pandemic. GitHub Desktop could not do anything when it came to like, what is it called? It's on the tip of my tongue. Shoot, I'm not gonna remember.
We gotta Google it, man. We gotta Google it.
Dang it! Rebasing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Dang it! All right. Git rebasing. So Git rebasing, it couldn't do anything with it, or even cherry picking, it had issues with. So because of that, I wasn't fully on board. Now it handles all that. Yeah. So what are you getting out of the different? Is it just the satisfaction of typing it into the terminal to see it go? I understand, and here's my thing. I'm not anti-abstraction, right? Yeah. I think abstractions are cool, but you need to understand what's happening with that abstraction. So for me, these UI tools are a level of abstraction because you're not really touching the code anymore. So you need to necessarily at least have an idea, a fundamental idea of what's actually happening. So if you understand all that's happening, if you understand the nuances of like, by pushing this is happening. By pulling it, it's happening. By rebasing, this is what's happening. I think you're in a great situation then at that point, if that's what you feel comfortable with. I can't argue the UI tools at that point. There's nothing as of right now that I'm aware of that happens on a UI tool that doesn't happen in the terminal as well. So they're pretty equal at that point.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of anything that removes friction early on is a good thing, right? there's so many barriers to you learning and being successful learning that if there's something that you're really hung up on and there's a tool that makes your life easier, welcome to engineering. That's all we do is use tools that make our lives easier. So much about learning is getting over the activation energy to take action and to do the things that you need to do to be successful in learning. And so many programs start with Git like week one. That's absurd. Git can be scary. Using the terminal is scary. I often work with folks who haven't touched computers ever, or now the thing is our younger folks coming into programs haven't really used file systems, or they're used to iPad OS and Chrome OS, and anything on a Mac OS or a Windows computer is a little bit frustrating or scary or whatever it could be. And so throwing somebody right into Git makes absolutely no sense. It's always something that you can learn later on if you need to. I don't introduce Git until like week 7 of my courses most of the time. I do like people getting familiar with the terminal. And I think Git is one of the only real ways people interact with the terminal early on quite frequently, even if it's just to add, commit, push, all those types of things. So I do like people using the terminal when they first start Git, because you learn all the commands that you might not be familiar with. How do you change directories? How do you do all that stuff, which will be important later on as you're installing packages and stuff like that. So I do introduce it, but I don't have any hangups anymore, like you said, on using these other tools, because they do so much for you that honestly is just confusing in the terminal to figure out and do. So I don't use the tools right now, but if you're what you're saying about the rebasing being good now and cherry picking, I'm going to check that out honestly this weekend because that would be a game changer. So yeah, I think any tool that can, you're in this for a long haul, right? Like you're in this for not a couple of days, not a couple of weeks, no matter what the programs they're trying to take your money are going to sell you on. This is realistically like a year's effort, right? At a minimum. And anything that can keep you consistent and in the game is a big plus. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to feed off of that, because you're learning all these new things. And there's two things I always, if I don't bring them up every single time I talk to you, I've messed up. And that's active recall and spaced repetition. For a lot of folks that are learning how to code, you might not have been learning a whole lot up till right now, right? You might have been living your life, doing your job, and it's your first time being in an academic setting again. And the fact that these two concepts are not on the first page of every textbook I've ever seen blows my mind. Active recall, very quickly, when you're done learning something, say out loud all the things that you learned. Right? So if you do a section of FreeCodeCamp, when you're done, say out loud all the things you've learned. What it does in our brains is enable us to remember those things. You can do a quarter of the work and have better outcomes just by saying out loud the things that you learned. The second thing is spaced repetition, using some sort of tool that enables you not to forget all the stuff that you put in the hard work to learn. Software engineering is a cumulative career. The things I learned a year ago, I still use today. The things I learned tomorrow, I'm going to use 5 years from now. I don't want to forget those things. I use a tool called Anki or Anki to keep track of all the things that I'm learning. Don't worry about it out the gate if it adds too much friction. But if you're like, hey, I keep having to relearn this same thing over and over again, it's not sticking in my brain. That's not a you thing. It's just how we learn thing. And so putting these how to learn practices into place could actually really smooth out your learning journey. So if you're starting with any of the tools that we recommend, there's one other thing I tell you to add into it, which is the Learning How to Learn course on Coursera by the wonderful Dr. Barbara Oakley. You go through that course, you will have all the strategies you need to be a lean, mean learning machine, and then be actually able to apply that to whatever course you're starting off with in your learning journey.
Why are you sending us there, man? Why haven't you made your own version of this already, man? Why are you wasting my time? Making me sign up everywhere.
They're the GOAT. I don't know. Like I think there's some people that have done it better than I would want to do it. And I've done all these courses. All the things I'm telling you to do are things that I consume myself that have had a real impact on myself. And so the three people I send people to, Quincy of FreeCodeCamp, because it's had a big impact on being able to learn stuff quickly. Dr. Barbara Oakley, because most people don't know how to learn. They have these like antiquated ideas of what it takes to actually retain information. And then a month later, they're upset. They're literally coming to me crying. Nothing makes sense. I can't learn anything. I can't retain anything. It's not a you problem. You just don't know how to learn. And so Dr. Barbara Oakley's course gets that out the way right away. It's on Coursera, completely free. Don't pay for the cert or anything like that. That's certs don't mean anything. You light them on fire, and that's the only value is they can give you a little bit of warmth. And then the last thing is I really like Ali Abdal's videos. His really early stuff when he was still grinding out his like medical degree, and he was using things like active recall, spaced repetition, and showing how it changed his study habits. If you consume some of those early videos, Dr. Barbara Oakley, you will be surprised at how much easier learning becomes, and you won't bang your head against the keyboard all year to get this stuff to sink in. So please start with those things too.
So there's certain things that I drill into all of my students whenever I'm teaching. One is when it comes to learning, I'm a very, very big proponent of learning how you learn. So all of Leon's recommendations I think are great. One thing that I kind of discovered about myself was, especially when I was trying to break into tech, I was working, if you don't know anything about my history, I worked in gas stations frying chicken. I was as broke of a joke as a broke person could ever be. I made just enough money to keep the lights on. That's about it, right? Like we had nothing extra. Even then, like, it was tough. And so for me, I was working 80 to 100-hour weeks on average, right? And so it was really tough, especially because my son was just born at the time. We were really he was a little bit past that, but I remember specifically like the weeks he was born, it was so tight that I couldn't even imagine how we were going to survive it. And so because of that, I got into this habit of just constantly working these crazy hours. And so what I would do is I would try to learn to code after work, but I'd be so tired to the bone that I felt like I was reading the same thing 5 or 6 times and I still wasn't retaining it. Yeah. And so for me, what ended up becoming the magic sauce was I would wake up every day at 2 o'clock in the morning to study before I went to work. I'm not saying you should do that, but what I am saying is it is very important and pivotal to your learning journey and your career, because I still do this now to a certain degree. And it doesn't matter what time of the day it is. Maybe my 2 a.m., my 4 a.m. is your 7 p.m. But there has to be a time in the day where you finally say, I'm a priority within my own life, and I'm going to dedicate this hour a day to myself, right? You have to be a priority within your own life. I don't care what time it is. I don't care how you do it. Somebody calls you, be like, I can't talk right now. I'm a priority right now, and hang the fucking phone up, right? You need to be a priority. Simple as that. And I think a lot of people, they forget that even as parents, we're so like, as a parent, we're constantly always thinking about, how's my kid doing? How this person, you're allowed to be a priority in your own life for 4% of your day. Yeah. Right. So 4%, 96% dedicate to the world, but for 4%, you're the priority. And so that prioritization of time is going to really help out, because now that consistency is going to be there. Just make that priority, even if it's not coding related that day. Maybe it's like, I can't look at another line of code. That's fine. Today's a day that you're going to grow in. How do I become a better leader? How do I grow this? How do I have better conversation? Something. Every day, 4% of your day should be dedicated to some form of progress, even if it's not just hard coding, just something that you picked up, right? Yeah. And you'll be surprised at some of the ways that you progress that way. And so finding that time for me, it's really hard to do that when my family is awake. So I'm a very big believer in mornings. I hate the morning time. I'll be real. But I love what it gives me. And so it's just become a natural part of my day to wake up before my family does, so I can kind of progress, learn something, gather something, grow as an individual. And then after that, I just kind of go back to my life with everybody else. And the best part is, that early time of the day, I don't know if my boss is going to be in a bad mood. I don't know if, I'm going to have a rough call. I don't know if my code is not going to work the way that I want it to work. I don't know if I'm about to be chewed out by somebody else. I don't know if I'm about to get in an argument with my spouse or my partner. I don't know none of that at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know anything good or bad at 4 o'clock in the morning. Only, you know what I know? Silence, because nobody's awake. What do I know? I don't even know. The sun ain't even awake to wake me up yet, right? It's not there to greet me with my coffee in the morning. None of that's happening. It's just me, my code, my computer, my resources, my growth. That's why I like that time. And that could be your 7 p.m. Maybe at 7 o'clock in the afternoon or evening, nobody's bothering you. Everybody's out of the way, and you're just in your room doing you. That's perfect. So find that time. That's number one. Number two, I think it's very, very important to honestly think about and research your market, but also think about, how do you fit in there? Like, what are you going to be doing? And what can you do that's outside of the norm? One thing that I constantly drill into my students is unit testing. And for some of y'all, you might be like, what is unit testing? That's fine. Just remember that it's a concept that you heard here. And then as you start progressing, you add that in somewhere. And the last thing that I want to say is, I was susceptible to this too, that every tutorial that I came across must be the most latest and greatest, most up to date. If it was 6 months old, I couldn't even look at it. One thing that I wish I'd learned earlier on is you can roll back versions of React and Java and whatever else that you're learning to use that tutorial, because those concepts do not erase. And so even if, let's say, there's a better version of it out there, you're going to understand the concept anyway and be able to adopt that new version significantly easier. So if you come across a great instructor, a great teacher, but their thing is like a year old, that doesn't make it not worth exploring and trying out. So maybe you need to roll back a version of React. You can do it. I just did it on a project that I'm using now. Yeah. React 19 just came out. The project that I'm using, the library, it doesn't work with React 19. It works with React 18. So guess what? I rolled back my version so I can use that library in there, and everything is smooth sailing. So think about that. And so don't just discard any learning resource simply because it's not the latest and greatest.
I love that advice. Some of my 100 dev stuff starts 2 years ago. We got 20 plus people jobs this past month. And so I love that advice there. I also don't wait for the perfect resource, right? Pick something, get it done, stick to it. You're always going to be, for some folks, there's just this chasing of, I have to find the optimal path before I get started. I have to find the right thing, the right time, the right setup. I got to get the new water bottle, the new laptop, the new iPad. And once I have all that crap, then I'll be able to learn efficiently. No. There was I don't know if you saw the person that wrote 250 lines for NeoVim plugins on their phone. That was wild. Right? They're fundraising them for a laptop. We got to link to it or chip in somehow. But that was wild to me. Like, we're going to come up with all these things in our brains to stop us from taking action. There will be no perfect course. There will be no perfect tutorial. There will be no perfect time. Like Danny's saying, you gotta make that little 4% for yourself. Pick something, get started, and then I always say see it through to the end. Unless it's like really phenomenally crappy, like see it through the end. Because the other trap I see people fall into is they'll start with FreeCodeCamp, then they'll jump to something else, and they'll jump to 100 devs, and they'll jump to Odin Project, and they'll jump to something else. And they never see something through to the end to get that wide view of how everything comes together, that they can then go and fill in all the pieces that were missing or fix the things they need to fix. So pick something, take action, don't delay, start today, and see it through to the end. Also, I mentioned Odin Project. That's another really good place to start too.
Yeah. One extra thing that I want to put in here, because I was thinking about it as you were talking. I think it's very important the more time your fingers are on the keyboard as opposed to thinking about code, right? Or thinking that you're doing something. Don't confuse movement with achievement. Don't confuse the thought of action with success. The only true metric of like whether you've made a project or not is whether you made that project or not. And so a lot of beginners, because I'm seeing these resumes. For example, last week I had 3 hours extra, and I was like, for these 3 hours, I'm going to give back to the community this Saturday morning before I get my day started. I tweeted out and I shared it on LinkedIn. I'm doing resume reviews for the next 3 hours. Drop your resume. And I'm talking about these beginners. To be honest, even managers have bad resumes. Yeah. Some of them were truly like wild. But so many beginners are on there like, oh, here's this weather app. Here's this. And I've been learning to code for 2 years, and I can't get a single callback. It's like, for 2 years, and what do you got to show for a weather app? A weather app to me is the first project that you build in JavaScript when you finally learn about APIs and you apply to get your first API key. That is the most common project we make as beginner developers. Yeah. I'm sure somebody's gonna get ruffled. Well, actually, it's like chill out, bro. Like that's the perception, and perception is a big deal here. Yes. So that's not the project you want to lead with. That's not the project that. And if that's all the projects that you've built within 2 years, there's a bigger issue than anything that you're learning at this point. And so, like I always tell people, what I want to see you do is put your fingers on that keyboard and let them dance around a little bit. You don't have to hold back. Let them dance. Let them go around. Make some stuff. Break some stuff. That's how you become a better developer. Yeah. If you're too scared to break something, and if you're too scared to look foolish, you're going to be terrible at this. So trust me, swallow the pride, get those fingers on the keyboard, write some terrible code so that way you can learn how to write some better code. That's the only way to do it. And so please stay consistent with this. And when it comes to like other resources to end up utilizing, one of the most common theme with developers, Udemy. We're all known to have hundreds of Udemy courses that we've all bought with our hard-earned dollars and never used. But you know what? Even if you have 50 of those courses, let's say you paid $10 a piece, $20 a piece, that's $1,000 on the high end. You're barely scratching the surface of what you'd spend pretty much anywhere else. Now, do you need that many courses? No. There's no reason for it.
It feels good. It feels good to spend that money.
It's a shopping addiction that you can have that you only buy one course when it's on sale, right? So it's like, that's $10, $20. It doesn't feel bad. Then you start seeing the backlog, right? But I will say, and they have free courses too. But understand one thing, when it comes to these low cost resources to free resources, there's no barrier to entry. So it's worth all the money that you didn't pay for, right? So whatever you didn't pay for, it didn't cost you anything. There was no barrier for them to put it up there. So you need to really audit your resources and just ensure like wherever you're learning from is a good resource, because even bad developers can throw stuff on YouTube. And I'm not calling out any names. I'm not saying anybody's bad in general, but maybe they don't necessarily know the best practices, or maybe they don't know the most secure practices. These are things that you need to really think about when getting your influence of where you're starting to develop. So just audit it. Like I always say, even our advice, do your research. If it applies to you, perfect. If some of it applies to you, perfect. If none of it applies to you, thanks for listening. But just audit it.
Yeah, it's really don't ever listen to random people on the internet telling you what to do. You always have to research. You have to verify. A quick Google, it can do a lot. I always hate to say this, but a quick Reddit search could do a little bit there too. People hate me on Reddit, so it's always a double-edged sword there. But no, hearing from what people are saying and doing, and what's been successful for them could be a big help to helping you plot out that course. And I do like, once you do pick something, every single thing that you learn, make your own, right? I love your saying, let the fingers dance a little bit. Any tutorial that is a weather app, great. How can you make it a weather app for where you live, or something different, something unique? If it's a calculator, how do you make it a calculator that's unique to you, or the industry that you come from? Like, how do you modify each thing that you do so that when somebody's comparing two portfolios, and we're like, oh, this is something that like makes sense in your portfolio, and this is something you did from a tutorial. Make every single thing your own, even from the beginning, from day one of you following a tutorial. If you put out some code, figure out, all right, how can I make this a little bit different? How can I change this color? How can I add this little bit of functionality? Make it your own, and always kind of pushing yourself a little bit outside of the comfort of what was laid in front of you is going to add up those skills so much faster than just following along, going home and turning it all off,
OG Danny Thompson followers will know this phrase, but ABL, ABB, CCC. ABL, ABB, CCC. Always be learning, always be building, code. Always be learning. Don't stick to just one resource, multiple resources, because two teachers don't teach the same. You can grab so many concepts learning the same subject from two different sources. Always be building. Build those projects. You need to go ahead and build something, break something, create something, make your own version of that thing. I think one of the best ways to fight tutorial hell is to build your own version of that project. So, for example, if you're following a tutorial that says, hey, we're building a car reservation system, build one for houses. Is it a cat app? Build one for dogs. The basic structure is going to be exactly the same, but you're going to have to start thinking outside of the box to build that new thing. And CCC, code. Let those fingers dance around on that keyboard. There's no shortcut to success in this field. The lines of code will come, they will go, they will disappear, they will frighten you, and they will become the shower thoughts like, damn, I should approach that problem in that way, shape, or form. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think you need to be very well aware of that. And so if you're an OG follower, you definitely know that phrase because I said it for years and I stopped for a while. But that one right there, that was my mantra for years. I'm so glad that I thought of it because it kept me going. And always be learning and always be building doesn't mean like 24 hours a day you're trying to touch stuff. But it's like a mental thought like, oh, I haven't really thought about this today. Let me take a look at this. Or I was working on this problem yesterday and I was stuck. Let me just do some research on my break real fast to kind of figure out, like, can I figure out a way past it? Stuff like that really goes a long way. And so hopefully that helps. And as far as like other resources, there's one extra resource that I'd give. I always like to shout them out because I love what they do. And they are a program that's called MOOC.fi/EN. And they have courses on there from like their Java course, for example, is for like the University of Helsinki. Yep. And so it's really like top tier level content at a very high caliber. So I think resources like that are great, and it's free. I would try to leverage that as much as possible. I don't think you need to break the bank. Also, communities, damn it. Communities. I'll say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I really think it's important that you surround yourself because, and I've given this example before, I'll give it again. It's really hard for non-technical people to realize what it is that you've done. Yeah. And so for me, I remember this one situation vividly. This is when I was learning Java, and I was trying to figure out like how to create API that shows on the front end, and like how to connect these two things. And I spent all this time. It was like so much complex logic on the back end because I was trying to speed up processes and make things work, and like all this calculation. And then on the front end, it was just like really displaying the text. And I remember showing it to my wife, and I showed it to her. She's like, "Oh, this doesn't really look that great. Like, it would be better if you showed this." I'm like, well, it's not supposed to look great. It's a back end thing, and I'm just really displaying on the front end, and it's like showing. She's like, yeah, but who's going to want to use that? You need to make that. I'm like, I get what you're saying, but that's not the goal of this. Can you see? And then I remember that same night going to a meetup, and as soon as I showed it to my buddy, he's like, oh, man, how did you do this? And he's looking at it. He's like, oh, man, I know this had to take some. Non-developers have a hard time truly relating to what it is that you've gone through, how much time you spent. Yeah. And it happens all the time at work, right? They're like, can you just move this button? It's like, I can. There's other elements in the way that have to be moved out in order to do this. It's going to overlap this. They don't understand. They're like, just move the button, dude. Like, just drag it and move it. And it's not the way that it works. So being a part of a community, going to meetups, hanging out with folks, even online events, online Discords. During the pandemic, everybody in the mother, brother, sister, or cousin decided to start a Discord. Find the community that identifies with you. I'll plug mine, commit your code. Maybe that is the one that's great for you. Maybe not. We have 12,000 developers in there. I think it's a great community. They're really active, but that might not be your vibe. So find out where your vibe is and go connect there. Find your tribe, find your people, find your community, and just go about it. Leon, not to plug his, 100 devs, amazing Discord community. It's so active. Every time I look in there, people are in the voice channels hanging out. Go hang out there. Go find your people. Because once the moments get dark, because they will, once the coding gets hard, because it will, you're going to want to have somebody next to you that kind of relates, but also maybe they can advise you through it. And those communities are great ways to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the community piece is the only thing that matters. One of the things in 100 Devs we talk about is we're not self-taught, we're community taught. Even our course tracker is communitytaught.org, made by somebody from our community. And so this idea of learning by yourself is almost a fool's errand. You're always going to get stuck. There's always going to be something that doesn't make sense. Leaning into that, it's something we didn't mention right now, but leaning into this idea that it's going to be tough, things aren't going to make sense, you're going to feel stuck, you're going to feel weird asking questions. Find a community where you don't feel weird getting help, where you don't feel less than for asking for the things that you need. My dog just bust into the room. They're here to be community taught as well, right? And so find that space like you're saying. On our Discord, you just go to discord.gg/100devs. We have every Tuesday and Thursday, we do a huddle at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. You'll learn from others that are on the job hunt, that are learning how to code. You'll be in community. We have like 400 people that show up to each one of those huddles. Every single day, there are people practicing behavioral questions. Every single day, people practicing technical questions live in voice chat channels. You don't have to go through this journey alone. Find your community. I think that's the biggest piece people miss. And ask questions. Get help. Understand that every single person that's on this journey has been exactly where you are, where they don't know how things work. They don't know how things connect. They don't know the latest and greatest, but they decided, like Danny said, to give themselves 4% of their day, to keep learning, to keep pushing, to keep progressing. And that 4% each day snowballs into something so much more when you have community to make sure you don't get stuck, to help you through the highs and the lows. And so please, that's the one thing I want you to listen to us about, is just find your people. It's going to make their journey so much easier.
I think that's more than enough advice on where to get started, how to keep going. You want to do Ask Danny and Leon? We'll wrap this one up.
Sure, let's take a peek. Question is, when should you do it afraid, and when to honor your feelings and to know if it's anxiety or laziness or a gut feeling that you should take it easy?
That's such a good question. You want to take it first? I've got a take on this. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be your favorite take.
So the reason why I wanted to ask this question, if Danny is a machine, people come to me like, Leon, how do you do so much? And I'm like, oh, this is this. And then I see Danny's work ethic and I'm like, how does he do that much? Right? Like, okay. And so there's like levels to this. And so I'm curious what your response is, because I think I'm going to learn from it. But for me, I think there's always, especially if we're relating this to like the learning process, right? If we're relating this to the learning process, you have to realize that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You're in this for the long haul. You need to be setting up systems so that you can make it through the long trough of sorrow that comes with a lot of down and low moments. And being consistent and having that level of grace given to yourself to see it through to the end is a really big struggle. And so there are going to be moments where you don't feel like doing anything. There are going to be moments where you feel like taking it easy. And I think it's okay to, in certain periods of time, take a break. Always plan a day where you're coming back. Don't just take an indefinite break. Give yourself that grace to ride it out. But have a game plan. All right, after this break, what does it look like? When am I coming back? What are the things I'm going to get done? And then when I say it becomes a problem is when you're slowly but surely not getting closer to your goals and it's becoming an impact to you. That's when you got to stop and like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe I have to change up my schedule. Maybe I need to do an hour before work, because after work, I just keep slipping. Like something happens, dinner plans come up, whatever it may be. My kid needs something, right? And so maybe you have to think about, all right, how do I structure it so that it's not me being lazy or anxiety? It's just I'm not setting up my life to be successful. And so I think it's worthwhile to take moments where we reflect on our lives. And I really like what Dr. Eric Thomas says. He says, don't go into your life like an accident. I really do think planning out your life, figuring out those pieces enables you to ride out some of these feelings. But those are things I think about. But I really want to hear your answer to this, because I've never seen, like, I'm not even trying to like gas here or anything like that. Like, I just literally have never seen somebody that operates on a level that you operate at, and it's kind of scary.
That's crazy. Okay. So there's a lot that I'll say this. Preemptively, I will say that sometimes my answer is not necessarily the most social media friendly answer, but it's the answer that I live by. And so I'm not advising anybody to do this. Figure out what works for you. If that works, go for it. I have a workaholic mentality in the fact that I grew up with nothing, right? And I lived majority of my life with nothing. I am now in a situation where I have something. And the reality was, I got really motivated once I realized I could have something. When I started learning how to code, I never learned with the intention or idea that like, oh, I'm going to get a job in tech, because I still didn't think that was possible. I just thought I'm going to build a website, something great's going to happen. People are going to be shopping on that website. That was the limits of where my thought capabilities went. Once I realized I could work in this field, there was nothing in the universe that was going to stop me from being here. Like nothing, no human, no obstacle, nothing. And I think it was that mentality that really just shifted everything in my favor, right? Conversations went my way because people realized one way or another, we're going to be doing something together, whether it's today or in a year from now. So if it's going to be in a year from now, we might as well get friendly now, because we're going to be doing something together in a year. And so even now, I think with a lot of these CEOs, CTOs, VPs that I'm interacting with, I think they're realizing Danny's going to be here for a while. So I might as well start interacting with him now. And they're starting to go that way. I'm not necessarily an extrovert by nature, to be honest. I'm so happy hiding in the closet all the time, but it's like a switch in me where I'm like, I know I have to do this in order to get XYZ results. So I'm going to go ahead and make that happen, because for years, this was like the biggest lesson that I ever learned in my life. We all worked at the same gas station, right? And the gas station, I think, if you've never worked there or not, you probably have some idea. Gas stations, there a lot of the times employees shift over quite quickly. You might have a couple that have like long-time employees. Hell, I was one of them, right? I just was comfortable in what I was doing. But I remembered there would be people that joined the gas station and started working after me, but they would get promoted before me. And there was definitely a common theme with them. And finally one day I was very agitated. I can't say the words I was feeling on this, right? Like I was just out there, like upset. And finally I took the guy to the side because he just got promoted to manager and I'm still in the same position, even though he was only there about 8 months and I was there 4 years. And I'm like, how in the hell did you become the manager and now you're making more money than me being there only 8 months? And he said, Danny, I demanded it. I said, either give me this or I'm getting the hell out. And that is when I realized that adage of keep your head down, work your tail off, somebody's going to recognize it, isn't always true. And I wish I learned that much earlier on, because once I shifted that, the raises started coming, albeit a dime here, a quarter here, whatever it may be. But that's when I started seeing, okay, there's something to this. And I started then getting mad at myself because I said, how many years have gone by? How much money have I lost in life simply because I didn't say, here's my raised hand. I think I could do it.
Yeah.
I think I could take a stab at it. I think I can knock that out. How many opportunities have I lost in life? So there comes a point when you're looking at something, you're like, am I doing this scared, or am I letting an opportunity to walk away from me? Now, I will say this, and Leon has kind of said this on another podcast episode, otherwise I'd never admit it. He's basically said he's seen me pick up a phone call. Once I realized there was nothing of value on there, I hung up right there. I got the power of goodbye. Like, I'll tell anybody goodbye, baby. I got no problem saying, we wasting time right now. I've walked out of interviews because I realized I didn't want to work there. Why am I going to waste time with somebody else? Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with walking away from a bad relationship, a bad opportunity, a bad conversation, a bad job. There's nothing wrong with it at all. So you don't need to be tied or married to any idea. One person that I love a lot, Jacob, he said this on Twitter one time. He said, out of everyone on Twitter, there's only one person I've ever met in my life who I truly believe will change his opinion if you show him the facts, and that's Danny Thompson. I pride myself on that, right? I'm not married to any idea. So when it comes to doing something scared or honoring your feelings, I think you need to listen to both, right? Be terrified, listen to your feelings, figure out who you're going to be loyal to in that regard, right? Yeah. But if you're being scared, but you know an opportunity is there, are you going to be the person that says, dang, I can't believe I let this walk away simply because I didn't say I was interested, or I didn't try and put my effort into something? I've always said if I'm going to fail at something, it's never going to be due to a lack of effort. It's going to be for something else. It's going to be because of some external force. Maybe somebody just knew the secret sauce and they were able to get it done in time. Maybe somebody had the right connection. But if it's effort driven, I can deliver that. Right? I'll never short sell myself. And so that starts becoming the question, like, how often are you saying, I can't do this because I'm scared, or I can't do this because my feeling is telling me I'm scared and I need to stop? You need to honor that feeling, but at the same time too, if you're not putting yourself as that priority and putting yourself on that pedestal to really get that thing done, you're killing those opportunities. You're killing your chances. And and the last thing that I'll say, this is the question that I ask myself all the time. And I asked myself this at the age of 25, at the 30, at 35, at 40. What am I doing to make my life easier in 5 years from now? Like, what can I do today that the Danny at the age of 40 is grateful for the Danny at the age of 35? And when I was 30, I said, what can I do today that the Danny at 35 is like, I'm so happy Danny at 30 decided to do this? I can tell you right now, tech, that's an easy one right there, right? All these years I spent toiling away, working away, hearing the phrase, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. I've never heard that once in tech. I haven't heard, you got time to talk, you got time to type. I've never heard that. So do something now that you in 5 years from now is going to be so grateful that you took the chance on. I've never heard somebody ever say, I'm so grateful Or I'm so mad that I spent that extra day studying that thing. I'm so mad that I took that chance to actually put myself out there. I'm so angry that I talked to this person that night and it led to a conversation down the road. I've never met that person, and you won't either. But if you're like, oh, if I go out there, I'm going to actually lose my job, that's a justifiable fear. Oh, if I go out there, I'm going to lose $100,000, that's a justifiable fear. If I go out there, I'm going to lose $100, that's a justifiable fear. But what fears could you really have that are going to do that in terms of getting a job opportunity? The only fear is they say no. Bye.
Yeah.
You just saved yourself a month of wondering if they're going to hire you or not. I talked to somebody that said, because I believe this, that 99.9% of the time, if you don't negotiate your salary, you're leaving money on the table. And someone said, oh, I did that and they rescinded the offer. That's possible. But I was like, do you not know how much stress you just saved yourself from? Could you imagine when the raise came in and you said, I think I deserve more? They're like, bye, you're fired.
Yep.
Or if you were to say, hey, this is not in my job description, I think we need to talk about this, you're fired. Can you imagine? That's not the company you want to work for anyway. They wanted somebody that's a pushover that's going to work for nothing. And I'm not saying every organization that does this is like that, but I am saying that if they can't even just say, hey, we can't honor that, like we're at where we are, do you want to take this? That's a reasonable company's attitude. A normal company would do something like that. If they full on pull the offer, ghost you, block you, and continue, you didn't want to be there anyway. And so when it comes to that, I do believe in honoring my feelings. One prime example is right now at work, I was asked to do something and I'm pushing really back hard on it because I think it's the wrong way to go. I've provided the stats. I provided all the details that I could. And they're like, I still think you need to do this. I'm like, this is the line in the sand for me. I'm not going to do this one thing.
Yeah.
And you know what they did? They honored it. So if you're in that situation where you really think it's a bad decision, your feelings are there and you can prove it. I always say confidence through proof. Right? Confidence through evidence, rather. If I can provide the evidence and produce that confidence, that's what I'm listening to. But if it's just a feeling, I can't imagine, unless life or death is on the line, I really can't imagine ever being in a situation where that fear will ever prove truly, truly right and not having a good conversation or not putting yourself out there or not learning something. Especially when we're talking in the realm of getting a job, gaining a career, doing something like that. This world is crazy for a million reasons. But if it's in that realm, I can't really ever see you doing something wrong.
Heck yeah. That was powerful. I needed to hear it. I know so many of you needed to hear that. And I'm going to put into practice what you said. Goodbye.